Well, I think to zoom out from this, Woman with a Movie Camera is a sort of programming umbrella, a sort of category of programming, if you will, that we have at BFI South Bank here. We do a Woman with a Movie Camera event every month at South Bank, and it's our way of ensuring that no matter what's going on in our program, we carve out a space for celebrating and platforming female and non-binary work, directors, writers, and ensuring that we have that every month in our program, no matter what. As you probably know, there's been huge shifts in filmmaking over the years, and it's been a real boys' game for many, many decades. And we've had definitely a more noticeable shift in the past decade, where there are more female directors who are getting their work out there and they're getting their work distributed, and we include a lot of that in our program anyway. So, you could come here tonight, for instance, we're playing the new release, the Canadian film Good One, which is directed by a female director. And we do seasons around female directors or female writers, producers and performers as well. So there's always a female presence in our program, but Woman with a Movie Camera ensures that each month there's space for something else alongside all that work that we do. And then once a year, we do the Summit, which is a all-day event that takes place here at BFI South Bank. It's sort of like a takeover of the whole venue. It's a day where you can buy a ticket and spend the whole day here. You can go to talks, you can go to panel discussions, short film screenings, you can take part in workshops in our foyer. It's basically what we do each month, but just sort of blown up and expanded and much more interactive and a little bit lighter and fun. Is that it? Have I missed anything?
No, I think just responding to what you were saying about the kind of the presence of women across the programme, I will say that the Strand hasn't existed forever. It's less than 10 years old, and it was founded basically because that hasn't necessarily always been the case. So there was a time all those many years ago in 2016 where it felt necessary to have a monthly event to ensure that there was something directed by women in the programme. Yeah. And it does speak very well to the film industry at large, but also our programming team. I think that has changed so significantly, and it's now just a lovely bonus.
Yeah, and I'd also say I think the need, we'll get into this a little bit, I think, in the history of Woman with a Movie Camera, but the need of it sort of shifted because, like you say, it was born in sort of 2016 where you weren't getting as many films released by female filmmakers, you weren't having as much programming by female filmmakers in the BFI program, so it felt like you were carving out that space. But now you do have that programming sort of elsewhere and in the regular program. It means that we can platform more deeper cuts, perhaps, sort of films that aren't getting releases, more niche documentaries, more experimental work. It's never just, programmed with just any old film by a female filmmaker. It's always about platforming and ensuring that we have something different in our program that happens once a month.
I also think I don't know if you agree with this actually, but there's a slight difference in how we approach the Strand and the Summit, in that the Strand is very much serving filmmakers and ensuring that we are creating that space, whereas the Summit is always very audience first, and we kind of think of it as a space that a lot of people who have a load in common, hopefully like you guys in the room tonight, will come and spend the day and meet each other, and they will go to quickfire events which will spark ideas, spark discussion. It usually spills out of the spaces. So it's kind of as much a social event as it is us presenting something to an audience. So that's kind of a slight difference for me.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, as you guys say, the Strand itself is relatively new, but even within that, the Summit is even newer, and you can see that it's kind of gone through quite a few changes, or it sort of had to adapt with some of the times over the last few years. And both of you guys were around for the first edition of the Summit. Am I right in thinking?
You were actually,
wasn't
you?
You weren't.
It just feels like I was.
I remember that quite fondly because that was the first thing that I ever attended at the BFI. And it felt like a really momentous occasion to kind of have that day of celebrating women. And then obviously, things then had to adjust slightly as we came into the COVID years, which I guess you guys can sort of talk about because you were very much involved in the online edition. So I'm quite interested to hear how things had to adapt for that, and then how we sort of had to adapt back in 2022 when we sort of brought it back to BFI South Bank again.
Yeah, I think before we do that, I want to pay homage to our sisters who pioneered the one with movie camera strand. So, as you say, it was 2016 when it started off, and it was sort of driven by Anna Bogatskaya, who is a programmer who is running the new South by Southwest London Festival that is coming to London in June. Next week is June, and Helen DeWitt, who is someone who's been programming for a really long time. She also teaches programming at Birkbeck in the National Film and Television School, and also Isabel Stevens, who is the sort of managing editor of Sight and Sound. And as it says on the slide, it was sort of influenced and born out of a special issue that Sight and Sound did at the time, which was focusing on the female gaze and films made by women. So they pioneered the strand. Anna pioneered this idea of having a summit, and then Anna left the BFI, and we sort of took on her work, and we did have during the pandemic we did a virtual version, which was very different. And I was talking to someone about this earlier, actually, because I think one of the most joyful things about the summit is how communal it is, and how it can be a day you experience on your own, a day you experience with friends, a day where you make friends, a day where you network, whereas when we went virtual we didn't quite have that. But the good thing about going virtual was we were able to pull more people into the summit, so people could attend no matter where they were in the world, I think. And we actually had some international guests as well.
We did, yeah, because I remember that it was really complicated geo-blocking some of the short films that we had created.
Yes.
But yes, that was certainly part of the appeal, and it would be great if we could do that more regularly. But to be honest, I don't remember the COVID Summit very well because I blocked out all of 2020. So
I think that's fair.
I can't tell you what the panels were. There was definitely, I had to learn what TikTok was, so I do remember that.
Yes, we did a TikTok panel. We had the director of Girlfriends, Claudia Veal. She zoomed in. So we tried to recreate a summit feeling, which was you could log on to this online platform, and throughout the day you could join different sessions and watch different sessions.
And we did have some workshops that were interactive as well.
We had some interactive creative writing workshops in there as well. But I think we were very happy to come back in person in 2022. And since then, 2022, we've been the summits, the summit team.
Yeah, so we've done 3 together.
Yeah. So I guess moving on to sort of the shape of the day, this is what this year's summit looked like. Ruby, if you want to...
This is a behind the scenes image. You'll never see this document anywhere else. So this is how we schedule everything between us as a team, and you can see kind of how the spaces lay out. So if you buy a ticket, you can go to anything on that grid. And we kind of try to design it so that there's a journey for anyone. Anyone who goes to the Chantal Ackerman talk might then be interested in going to a short film screening, NFT4, which, they don't clash. And then they might learn about the hijab in Hollywood, etc. So you should be able to make your way between the spaces, and in theory it is quite casual and you can drop in and out of them, but in reality actually that doesn't really happen. Obviously they're very dynamic events and nobody would ever want to leave one. So filling up that schedule is, we always have kind of 1 or 2 anchor ideas that the 3 of us maybe come up with at the start, and then we kind of use those, don't we, to sort of try and work out what's going to complement them. But the idea is that this one single audience member would probably be interested in a lot of this stuff. And at any one time in the day, there's always going to be one thing that they're interested in. So whilst there is a lot of diversity in there, we try and pull from different areas of cinema history, different colleagues, different kind of freelancers that we work with. There's always this sort of common audience member in mind. And I think if someone were to ask me, how do you decide what should be in the summit, it's basically thinking of that fictional audience member and whether they would enjoy it. So the spaces you see outlined here are our auditoriums, NFT 3, 2 and 4. The blue room is our more kind of interactive space upstairs. And then in the foyer section, as you can see, we just block out spaces to have all day activities. So most things have slots if it's a talk or a panel. And then there are more interactive. Collage Corner is a mainstay and has been there since 2016. But the others, we mix it up a bit.
Yes, and we also think about the different venues when we're programming as well. So it's not quite clear on here, but some of these, so the hijab in Hollywood, for example, was a panel discussion. We had a host and 3 guests, whereas the Chantal A intro up there was Chantal Ackerman intro, and that was a talk led by one person. So we think about the different spaces and how suitable they are. So NFT3 is the room that we're in now. As you can see, this is very good for a panel, for sort of sight lines and the space that we have on the stage. NFT2 is much better for a talk because the stage is a bit raised. We have a lectern mic in there. We always reserve NFT4 as our sort of small screen, and that's very good for smaller talks, but also film screenings, short film screenings as well. And as Ruby mentioned, the Blue Room, it's a bit more of a sort of social space. It's
we usually put the silly events in there, which is
yeah,
the ones where we expect people to heckle.
it's a little bit more interactive, I guess, but also because the Blue Room is basically like a sort of reception room that we have, it doesn't have the beautiful technical setup that you get in a screening room. So we put things in there that might not need sort of clips or samples of films to talk about to illustrate it, whereas obviously NFT3 and NFT2, NFT4, you've got a cinema setup at your disposal.
I like that you mentioned that the Blue Room is a silly space, and all 3 of us had our talks and panels.
It seems to go that way every year.
In the Blue Room this year. I like seeing it like this because I think it's quite easy to think of the summit as like one big event, but actually within that, we usually have about 20 to 25 separate events. And that's quite a lot in one day if you think about it. So I think this is a really good way to really be able to see the scope of the day. And just how much goes on. Because if you've got your certain pathway that you're focusing on, you know, it can be quite easy to think, oh, I'm just going to focus on these 4 events, but there's so much happening around you. And that's actually kind of one of the challenges, I guess, of us programming when things are going to happen, because you don't want things to clash against each other. But unfortunately, everyone can't go to everything.
Yes, I always say, because we feel when we're programming and scheduling, sometimes we think, well, these 2 things are going to be really popular. And actually the ideal is that you do put them opposite each other and you have popular things competing, because you want the whole event to be full. And a good summit should have like multiple pathways for someone. And, you know, some of the sessions do fill out really quickly and someone might not get into one, and you want them to have a really good alternative and say, oh, it doesn't matter that I didn't get into the animation talk, I can go see the hijab in Hollywood, or vice versa. So we're always aiming to put together a really appealing program. But I think the one feedback and criticism we get is people say, well, you put that really good thing opposite that other really good thing. Yeah. They're all good things.
Yeah, there are no duds.
Yeah.
We're also, you'd be amazed how frequently we're wrong about what will be popular. There's always one that kind of surprises us, isn't there? That's like, oh, look, this is completely round.
Yeah, and we have people queuing along the corridor to get in.
I think this year, your talk, Kim, Talks at Press Tour, was definitely one of those, right? People were queuing along the mezzanine to get into that one.
Yes.
Yeah.
It had a lot of pressure.
And I guess it's good to note, so, I mean, as we say, there's capacities on things. So across the day, we sort of welcome about 350 audience members. So that's kind of like the scope across the day. And then obviously each auditorium has different capacities. So at any one time, there's about 350 across the building, which is really exciting. And there's a real buzz to it all. I guess another big question is why we do it. We've sort of touched upon that a little bit.
Yes.
With the history of the Strand. But I guess more specific to the summit itself.
Yeah. Well, I can talk to some of these points. So we're dedicated to platforming and celebrating the work of female non-binary filmmakers, as I said. So I talked about how there's been some shifts in the past decade in terms of female filmmakers getting their work picked up and distributed into cinemas, but the stats still aren't great. Over 600 films are released a year in the UK, and I think Reclaim the Frame, an organisation dedicated to championing female filmmakers, they put out some stats last year which said that only 12% of those films were directed by women or non-binary directors. So that's out of the well over 600 that were released. So that's why we, keep the Strand going. And as we said, the monthly Strand is about kind of platforming and picking up some of those films that don't get wider recognition. So this work will always be important to us. but mainly with the summit, because as Ruby described, it's very different. It's much more audience focused perhaps than being driven by the films and the filmmakers. So it's about having a space for female and non-binary voices to lead on conversations about things that impact us in film, around film, intersecting with other things. So it's really important that we build that space and we welcome people into that space and have different voices leading those discussions. These are a little bit perhaps not as important as that, but I think still part of what we do, which is creating a space that feels good. That's because, you know, as I said that stat to you, I could see a few of you just sort of slumping in your chair because you're like, oh God, it feels depressing sometimes when you're talking about the sort of gap between men and women in filmmaking. And there's lots of serious issues that come to the forefront when you talk about women in film and the treatment of women in film and in art in general, and that can be really heavy. And we're keen to engage in that stuff, and we think that's really important, but we don't want to have a day of perhaps just an outpouring of the frustrations that we have. It's about building a day where you can find hope and inspiration and just have a good time necessarily as part of it. Collaboration and networking opportunity, as I said, you know, you can come to the summit and have a day to yourself and experience everything on your own and I think still have a really good time, but it is also an opportunity to meet like-minded people who are interested in the same things that you are, and as I said, having fun with it. We mentioned that we have a few, quote, silly things that we do in the silly room. I
regret it already. I shouldn't have said
it. We'll talk about that in terms of programming, but you know, we do make an effort in locking into some more zeitgeisty things, which do bring a bit of fun to, you know, female representation and you know, females in film. We've had previously we had this pattern of always deconstructing like a bad trope. I feel like we did the sort of strong female character was one of the early summits. We did looking at the girl boss character who sort of emerged in the late 2010s. We looked at the sort of waif Sally Rooney character that was cropping up in films. So we always want to have something that's really playful in the program, as well as alongside of, you know, sort of much more serious, deeper dives.
I think that last point is really important, and I love that we've included this aspect of fun, because I think there's such a stigma around women enjoying themselves and feeling safe and having a laugh, and immediately it's kind of discredited as being unintellectual, when actually, you know, you can have a laugh about something, you can talk about memes, but it can be in a deeply intellectual way. And even if it's not, that doesn't necessarily matter. Mm-hmm. I think what the summit does really well is play with that dichotomy quite a lot. And also what some of the events in the strands do as well. It's about reclaiming that aspect of women just being allowed to exist and have fun and to be themselves and have some good conversations along the way. And I think that's something that, you know, it might seem like a silly point, but we always try to prioritize when it comes to not just the programming, but like the general space making that we're doing for that day, in terms of other activities that are going on, the kind of provisions that we put in place for attendees to feel safe, like having a quiet space this year, having sort of those alternative spaces if people don't want to be in an auditorium, if they just want a chance to chat to each other. That is always at the kind of forefront of our minds when we're putting together this day.
Yeah, I think that's really well put.
I guess maybe we should have started with this, but it might be worth talking about why we are the three up here talking to you today, when actually this is a huge operation, and we'll get into that a little bit in a minute. But as we said, from 2022, we've sort of, us three have been at the helm of this, and the sort of core team that kind of bring it to the wider BFI. We've put pictures even though you can see us in real life right now, but these are our more post selves. So I thought maybe we could all kind of talk about ourselves in the wider context of our work at the BFI, but also within the context of the summit. So, we've sat in the right order as well. This is good.
Great. So I have to go first.
Yes.
Okay. So as you know, my name's Kim. I've been programming at the BFI for over 5 years now. I'm currently the lead programmer. Before that, I was a film and events programmer. And Woman with a Movie Camera has always sort of sat in my portfolio while I've been working here, which has been a real sort of pleasure. Yes, and the summit has always been my responsibility while I've been working here as well. One of my favourite things about the summit, though, is unlike some of the programming I do, which can be quite solo and insular, is that it's always been a collaborative experience since I've been looking after the summit. It's been us for the last 3 years, but when it was virtual, it was you and other people as well. That's such an important part of the summit, is how collaborative it is. My main input, as you can see, we're sort of split between programming and then programming and producing, which is Lilia. She'll talk a bit more about what's involved in that kind of dual role. But in terms of programming, it's pulling together all these sessions and all these ideas, whether we're coming up with the ideas ourselves or we're working with external programmers and we're bringing different voices into the program. Over to you.
Thank you. So I work in the programming team with Kim, primarily as a project manager. So I often project manage our big sort of UK-wide seasons or kind of big headline programs. But I do also work as a film programmer. And I actually started working on the summit when I first started at the BFI as a PA to our then head of cinema, Scaling Gold. So I've kind of done a lot of different jobs on the summit. And I think mainly I'm still involved because we work well together and we just started off bouncing ideas around in the office, and then when you joined as well, and I just got sucked in, really. I can't escape no matter how many times I've tried. And then Lilia, you do all the actual work, which is really wonderful. Much appreciated.
I don't know if that's true. I sort of came to this originally from a production perspective. Usually I work in the events production team as a production coordinator, producing all of our kind of live events, so Q&As and conversations. And I started off doing festivals here, and then it was 2022 when I came across to our year-round team, and I met these guys. And I've always had an interest in programming. I did some external programming for other kind of organisations. And as we say, we sort of got talking, kind of were sharing ideas, and I had the opportunity to kind of straddle two sides of the same coin with this. So as Ruby said, I sort of head up the production element on this, but that isn't to say I do all of the production on this. We have an incredible team of producers here that you'll see running around with clipboards and radios in any live event. And closer to the event date, we will get them on board. But from the kind of initial stages, I'm overseeing all of our sort of production elements and getting things off the paper and actually kind of happening. It's been, I think...
It's quite hard to break down our roles, I think, because this will probably become more apparent, but a lot of the programming we do is us coming to sit down, the three of us, and saying, I've had like these 50 ideas, which ones are rubbish, which ones are good. And actually, by the time we reach scheduling everything, you can almost not remember who came up with what ideas, because we've kind of swapped things around, or we've brought in different voices at various points. So it is very much a kind of hive mind, I think.
Yeah, we overlap quite a bit, and I think there's quite like a natural way that we sort of work together, and sort of pick up things from each other and sort of kind of like unspoken almost. So it works quite well.
Well, it's definitely better because of that. If anyone in the audience is an aspiring programmer, all of your work will be better if you run it by people early on.
Yeah.
All the worst ideas I've had are the ones I developed on my own in my bedroom.
No, I think that's really good advice. Before I started programming at the BFI, I was doing all my own programming. I was having to build a portfolio. I wasn't professionally programming. I wasn't earning any money from it, but I was still doing it. And the best way I think anyone can start, and how I started, was by forming a collective with friends and similar-minded people and getting together and saying, okay, we're going to put on some film events together. We're going to go to a community cinema or even our local pub, and we want to do a film night. Working with other people is 100% the best way to do it, because you're sharing the load, but being collaborative and having feedback from people you trust is essential, and that's how the summit is powered for sure.
Yeah, I think it's also just a good mindset to have in terms of programming in general. Like, it's often seen as a very like insular thing. There's a lot of gatekeeping when it comes to programming. People will hold on to their roles if they've got lucky enough to get them. And I think we're very much of the mindset that it is a shared experience, that, you know, it is something that benefits from so many voices, different perspectives. And I guess we'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute, but why we sort of wanted to open that out even further, because it can only end up in a better summit, a better kind of piece of programming.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe we'll get into the nitty gritty of how we do it all. We've spoken a bit about what it actually is. So Kim, do you want to take us through some of the ethos when we're sort of looking at
so I think I've touched upon this a little bit previously, but this is just the sort of general ethos of putting the summit program together, which I think is also just a handy rubric for programming in general if you're interested in programming, which is, so the summit is balancing lots of things. We talked earlier about sort of balancing fun with sort of seriousness. And here are some key principles that I think we balance. So there's celebration and reframing. So you might be celebrating or spotlighting a director that people know a lot about already, or you might be looking at someone's work differently and saying, well, you know, you think you know rom-coms, but actually we're here to tell you about how they are much more intellectual than you think, or how they're much more important to culture than you think. And then there's discovery and rediscovery. So that is perhaps bringing directors to the forefront that you might not have never have heard of, or perhaps directors who have been a little bit lost in history and we're focusing the lens on them. Discussion and debate. So we've talked about the different types of things that happen at the summit. So you can go to a talk and that is someone basically telling you about something, giving you a lecture in a way, a fun lecture. And then there are panels where you can listen to lots of people's opinions happening. And then there are sort of Q&A sessions where you can get involved yourself. And I think that's an important balance for the summit, because if you go to talk after talk after talk, you've just been talked to all day and that can be exhausting. Whereas if you go to a discussion or a Q&A, you can get involved and that can be much more stimulating. We also always have a balance between sort of archive and contemporary stories. So we'll get into this, but we often work with other parts of the BFI to bring some of these stories to the forefront. So we work with our filmmaking fund. They've presented panels with filmmakers that they're directly funding, sort of almost fresh off their films. We did a comedy panel with them, and they had, you know, Alice Lowe, and she just finished making Time Stalker and could talk about that before the film came out. But equally, we work with our archive colleagues who have plenty of stories from rep cinema that they want to platform and profile. We had one this year about script supervisors and how that was a female-led profession in the early era of cinema, and they had some scripts from our archive that had been marked up by female script supervisors that they wanted to showcase. So it's having that balance of these sort of contemporary stories, archive stories, and everything in between. And then we've mentioned the zeitgeisty topics. These do tend to be the more popular sessions and sort of can be headline grabbers, which I think it's quite a fun activity, being able to predict what's going to be a hot topic. So I think this year the hot topic that we landed on was press tours, after the sort of mortifying experience of seeing the It Ends With Us press tour, the Don't Worry Darling press tour, and the women, mainly women in those news cycles, and what happened to them and their reputation. But I think, was it the year before we did Nepo Babies? That was one of yours.
I had two zeitgeisty ones the year before, actually, because I did Nepo Babies, which is a silly one, in the silly room. But then also we did Consent on Screen after
yes,
How to Have Sex came out.
Yes.
Yeah.
We also did girl memes as well.
Yes.
It was the year of the girl, yeah.
Oh yeah, the year of the
girl dinner,
girl dinner,
yeah.
girl walk, hot girl walk.
Yeah.
So it's picking apart, usually, like, they're kind of internet zeitgeisty topics, which we will get a few speakers in and we'll talk about them. And as Lilia is saying, it is, it's fun. It's fun to talk about these things, but also sort of reposition them and have more serious conversations about them. I definitely felt like the press tours one that we did last year was like, it was fun to look at, Harry Styles talking about a real movie on his press tour, but then underneath that there was like a very serious thing of like, what does it mean that Olivia Wilde was so brutally torn apart in the press with this film? So yeah, we always sort of have our heads in the game for looking out for what these topics could be, and we don't always come up with them until a month or two out of the summit.
Yeah, they're the last ones.
They're the last ones that come in. But
we debated for ages this year, is it too late for Brat? And it was too late for Brat.
Yeah, it was too late to do Brat Summer. But we're always thinking about those sorts of things because, they're really fun to talk about, but also we have a chance of being a little bit ahead of the conversation and starting the conversation about some of those things as well. And then the bottom thing here is just the absolute essential, which is considering all this, considering balancing the program. It's just thinking about the topic and yes, is it important? Will this story connect? And what is the best format for unpacking this idea? So going back to what Ruby said earlier in this discussion, you're thinking about, well, who's coming to the summit? Imagining that audience member. Is this something they're going to be interested in? Can I see how they might connect to this and other topics? And yes, what's the best format to talk about this thing? So, talking about zeitgeisty internet things, it is in our blue room, which is our sort of less formal space. It is something that's going to, invite discussion and invite heckling and fun and that sort of thing. But then if someone is doing, an introduction to Chantal Akerman, that is definitely more formal and you probably don't want too many discussions and opinions for that because it's only a 30-minute session. You just want someone to guide you through why that filmmaker's important. So yeah, that best format for that is a talk. So that is general is what we're thinking about when we're piecing the summit together program-wise.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the next important thing is how do we actually make all of those things happen? You'll see here we kind of work on it about 6 months of the year. This hasn't always been the case. We haven't always been this organised. I feel like as the years have gone on, we've got better at kind of recognising just how much time we need
too many stress streams
to get to January. Yes,
it's not sustainable.
Stress streams over the Christmas holidays is not ideal. So we've become kind of a little bit better at organising ourselves as the years have gone on, and this is kind of reflective of how we worked last year and also how we're going to work this year. And I'm just conscious now that June is next week and we need to start working on this.
Okay, you're ready.
So to kind of break it down a bit, so as Ruby sort of mentioned, we get together in the summer, we sit down, we think, right, what have people been talking about? What have we been interested in? What do we think the summit kind of needs to say this year? What did we do last year? What do we want to kind of change, adapt, do again for this year? And it's very much sort of like surface level, bouncing ideas off of each other, kind of floating around ideas and goals for that year, because we have grown bigger as the years have gone on. We've got a little bit more scope, a little bit kind of more to play with, so it's about sort of being able to contextualize that and thinking, right, what do we want to achieve this year? How are we going to do it? And then we sort of go away, we think a little bit more about our individual interests, what people are talking about, and we regroup and we kind of try and solidify those internal programming ideas. We look at our budgets for the year, we think about what's feasible, who do we want to collaborate with this year, who's kind of new on the scene, who are our regular collaborators that we want to bring back. And then kind of into the end of summer is, particularly last year, we were looking at our pitching form for opening out to external programmers. So for the first time last year, we got external programmers, collectives involved in the full program. And the initial plan was, I think, to have 3 externally curated events. And we ended up with about 10 because we had so many incredible pitches.
Really strong, yeah.
So before we can put that form out, obviously we are writing that, we're running it past various internal teams. We're contacting our social and web teams to build web pages, get assets together, planning outreach for promotion, making sure we can get the word out as far as possible, and we get people from all corners of the industry, or not even in the industry, reaching out to us with their proposals. And then September is when we get that live. Last year we did about 3 weeks of the submission period, probably similar for this year. And in that September time, we're also solidifying our own ideas and kind of waiting to see how submissions might fit alongside of them. And we kind of put together a production timeline for working with external programmers. That was very much a learning curve for us last year, something very new. As we say, we're kind of very used to us working as a trio and having stress streams, but we're like, we can't inflict those stress streams on other people, so we need to be organized about this. And we're sort of collaborating with other internal teams and kind of putting everything on everyone's radar, because this is also what tends to be our busiest period of the year as well. We've got LFF in this time, we've got big sort of Christmas, New Year releases, so we're often doing a lot in our public program, so we've got a lot to contend with on that side. Unfortunately, not everyone's attention is fully focused on the summit, when it should be, obviously. So we've got lots to consider when it comes to all of the other people that work on this with us. So by October, we are reaching out to our successful program applicants. We're reaching out to potential partners and sponsors, and our initial meetings are set up with our successful applicants to discuss their proposals in depth, because originally people will send us in about 300 words of a proposal with the intention of working with us to then form that into a fully fledged idea. And we'll sort of agree on the upcoming tasks for the coming weeks. And we will start putting together that grid schedule, as you see, figuring out where and when events are best placed alongside each other, and sort of putting that together across the day. And then November is kind of where it really ramps up. We've got initial speaker invites sent out, and the shapes of the events are fully determined, what content is required. Some will have PowerPoints, some will have clips. We can produce those in-house. Some people produce them themselves. We've got short films to get in, some of them international. So it's kind of working with other kind of film organisations to get those delivered to us. And then we're also filing away all the copy for the summit as well, for our website and our program updates. We kind of regularly check in with our external programmers, and all of our time and locations, all of the events are also confirmed, and our web pages are built for everything going live, which is really, really exciting. And this is when we sort of also ramp up our communication with our internal teams, so that everyone is up to date on all of the key elements like schedules, content requirements, accessibility requirements. And as I say, there's a big team of BFI event producers who then come on board for the delivery of the events as well. So this is where I will then sort of offload a lot of the work onto those guys, and they'll pick up. People are sort of delegated to each space. So 1 or 2 production coordinators will work on all of the events in NFT3, for example. And that's when I'll sort of pass things over to them to pick up. December is when summit tickets go on sale with the rest of our January program, and the full program is announced and pushed on socials. And also it's when we have a winter break. Break is in inverted commas because there's not much of a break in that time. We're always thinking about the summit. And then January we are back, and we usually have about 2 weeks until the summit itself. So this is when we get all rehearsals done, all of the content is in and checked on screen, and all call sheets are sent out to speakers. So just for a bit of context, the usual lead time on a single public program event for production is about 4 to 6 weeks. So we try and kind of kickstart things as early as possible, as we're dealing with an average of about 25 events in a single day. So that's why it's really important that, we are as on it as possible from June, so that it's not all a mad rush as we get kind of closer to the summit day. And as I say, ironically, our summit production schedule always coincides with the busiest time of year. So it is really important that we are across things, and I am sending lots and lots of emails to everyone, always chasing everyone for everything, just to ensure that there's as little stress as possible on the day, because we like to keep it fun. So that's kind of a general overview of just how early, I guess, we are kind of starting work on something like this, and just the scope of what it takes to go into getting to that one day in January. So this is kind of a little behind the scenes peek at some of our internal documents. Ruby, do you want to speak to what we've got on screen here?
So that's a call sheet on the left-hand side. So anyone who is presenting an event, again, there's 25, so that's like 25 collectives or speakers, or many more actually, because many panels have multiple speakers, will receive one of those, and it tells them when they need to arrive, who their point of contact is, what to expect, etc. The middle is a South Bank procedure sheet. We do these for every single event in the public programme. And so that is what our tech team and our front of house team use, so that they know what is happening when. And we produce one of those for, again, every single of the 25 events. And here on the right is slightly more familiar to the public, is kind of what we hand out on the day, saying this is the schedule for the day. But it's just a little bit of insight into the level of volume of documents and schedules that we need to do.
Yeah, I always think it's quite interesting to show people a procedure sheet, because we're so used to seeing a million of them every single day, but it really is such a great document to consolidate everything, and it really goes to show just how much work goes into a single event and how much you have to consider. So again, a little sneak peek. We also have a centralized master spreadsheet, which we work on to keep track of every single event, every person involved, every tiny bit of production that goes into that event. But that is top secret, and we won't be sharing that. We mentioned there...
We don't have time to talk about all of these. Don't worry, guys.
A brief overview. As we say, it's us three up here, but there are so many people behind the scenes that play a huge role in making the summit happen. Some of whom you see every day at the BFI, our amazing front of house staff. Some of whom you don't see because they're up in a projection booth, which are a tech team. But if it weren't for all of these different groups in the BFI, the summit would not happen. Everyone plays a really, really vital part in making that one day happen.
CPS is Content Production Services, and those are the people who actually make a lot of our clips and DCPs and just a lot of tech work. Just to explain that one.
This is a bit inside baseball.
It's a little bit that.
Yeah. A lot of people work on the summit.
So I guess breaking down the program a little bit more, as we've said, there are kind of different avenues in which events kind of come to the summit. So we've sort of broken these down a little bit here. In-house programming.
Good to have some images, so we've been talking a lot and you've been hearing us describe stuff. At least you can see this. If you've never been to the summit before, this is what it can look like. As we said, we have programming that's external and we have programming that's internal and led by us. So these were a couple of events that you led on, Lilia. Do you want to talk to what these were?
So as we say, we have kind of screening programs of short films in amongst all of the events. This was one that I curated this year, which was about Croatian female filmmakers and generational filmmaking. So this was a research topic that I had kind of been developing for a little while and still developing, and sort of Balkan cinema is something that you don't often see on screen. It's also a very personal project. I'm half Croatian, and this is something that we wanted to kind of involve some international cinema groups. So I was in communication with Zagreb Kino Clubs for this to get these films on screen. And I think in the past we've sort of looked a lot at sort of the role that motherhood plays in art coming from women, and this was very much a central factor of this shorts program, and something that we kind of wanted to bring to this edition as well. And I think it just goes to show that the summit is a space to really bring things to screen that you wouldn't necessarily see in other places, to give, you know, people a platform for work that might not get screened widely. So this was a really special screening for a number of reasons. And then next to it, we have here a panel from last year's edition of the Summit, which was about the rom-com renaissance. So obviously 2024 saw the 20th anniversary of loads of really iconic noughties rom-coms that a lot of us grew up with, but 2024 also saw a lot of newer rom-coms. So this was an opportunity to sort of discuss the kind of contrast between those 2 years, looking at the kind of tropes that films from 2004 utilised, how present they are now, and also kind of interrogating the nostalgia effect as well, reframing a lot of the films that we grew up with. And again, also touching on this idea of, can women enjoy things? Yes, they can. So this was...
Speak for yourself.
Well, this was obviously very film focused, but also I think this is an example of where we're kind of really getting into the nitty gritty of like the cultural climate as well. So we had 2 culture critics, Hania Angus and Jess Bacon, here on the panel talking to me about this, and that was a really fun one.
Oh, this is you and me programming that we did.
Yeah, these are both in the silly room, just to warn you.
The silly room.
Yeah.
As you can see, tech not quite as sophisticated as being in an actual screening room. But I feel like I've talked about the Toxic Press Tours panel, so I'll leave that just for an image, but just to say that we had Hania Angus, a Summit regular. She was on this panel as well, spoke really well. We had Lucy Ford as well, who was brilliant. Why don't you tell us a bit about No Sex, please?
Yeah, so this was in response to some online discourse around Gen Z resistant to sex scenes and what is appropriate, what isn't, what furthers a story, whether it matters, etc. But mainly it was just an excuse for me to gather a couple of people and get them to pick their favourite sex scenes and watch them with a room full of people. And it was great. And then we tied it into the quiz later, and I did a round of male-directed sex scenes, but with female-directed sex dialogue over the top, and you had to identify both films. So this is an example of silly programming.
Yes. Look at the rooms, though, round.
But technically there is definitely a serious topic underlying it, but you know.
But I think even just looking at all those examples of the sessions, you get a sense of, you know, you've got the discovery with the Croatian filmmakers, you've got the rom-coms, which feels a bit silly, but you know, you're actually interrogating and putting a different lens on that, and then you've got the sort of more zeitgeisty, you know, the online discourse about the sex scene and the press tours, which you know, is some of the more fun stuff. Want to take us along? Oh, there's more. So these are, I guess, the more sort of traditional, drifting away from the fun stuff, more serious stuff. So we often have in conversation sessions, so that's with figures who are talking about their careers. And we had Jane Giles, who, if you don't know Jane Giles and you're interested in film programming, this is a film programming legend. She programmed the Scala Cinema back in the day, before she ran sort of after that, she ran Tartan Video Publishing. She worked at the BFI, and she co-directed the recent documentary about the Scala Cinema. And this was kind of round about that time, so we thought it would be a good time to bring Jane in and hear about her career, which spanned several decades, and seen a lot of evolution, I say, about women and their treatment within the film industry, even behind the scenes. So it was really fascinating and just an absolute honour to have Jane Giles with us. And in the very same year, you were chatting to us about forgotten Hollywood screenwriters.
I am capable of being serious. Yeah, and I think that was a straightforward lecture. I'm always trying to inform or remind people that women did exist before like the 90s. And so this was a talk about the writers in early Hollywood. That's a picture of Frances Marion, who won back-to-back Best Screenwriter Oscars when the Oscars were first founded, and she was one of the major driving forces in the silent cinema era. But she's just one example. Most of the writers back then were women, and they were all great.
But again, you're getting a sense of what your day could look like at the Summit. You know, you could be doing sex scenes over here, hearing about screenwriters over there, hearing about someone's career. Next.
We've kind of spoken about these guys.
Spoken about both of them. So these are the illustrations. So what I was talking about earlier about how we work with other departments. So I mentioned that we had the script supervisors and their archives from our actual archive team, and they brought with them ephemera from the archive for us to have a look at, which was fantastic. And we've also talked about Chantal Akerman. This was a bit of a headliner last year, because the other thing that we do with the summit is that we respond to what's happening in the BFI Southbank programme in the year to come. So we knew that we were doing a giant Chantal Akerman retrospective, and there were new materials to be seen, and we were releasing Jean Dillman, the BFI distribution team were. So we wanted to create a primer that was a sort of a safe primer, because I think it's important for us to not assume that everyone knows everything about just because you're here, you know everything about female filmmakers. Chantal Akerman was a really important figure, but if you haven't seen one of her films before, that's okay. Come along, we'll tell you about it, and then you'll be ready for when the season rolls around. So that was quite an important one for us. And I also mentioned this one earlier. This is the BFI Filmmaking Fund doing a comedy panel with some of the filmmakers that they've been, literally immediately funding.
I guess maybe something important to mention here is that, yes, sometimes we do have big names attached to the summit, and that's fantastic, and it's great to hear from these people, but that's never like at the forefront of our minds when it comes to programming the summit. It's not about the kind of the name to catch someone. It's about like the genuine conversation. And that was something that we did genuinely really get from this panel. It was a really exciting one that we had.
So you can't see, but you've got that's Joanna Scanlon, Alice Lowe, and Susan Wakoma. So some good names talking about comedy. But I think this was in the same year where we had the career conversation with Jane Giles, who is a sort of behind the scenes, more undersung figure I think in the film industry, but just as important. So we're always thinking about that balance as well.
And then open submissions, which was our new thing for this year.
Yes. Yeah, so we've always worked, it's not like we come up with every one of those 25 events. We've always worked with a range of kind of partners and freelancers, but historically those have been people that we already knew or that had already spoken at the BFI, who had a foot in the door basically, and it had been something we wanted to change for a long time, but it's, for various red tape reasons only got around to it last year. So this was our first year where we promoted to anyone who wanted to submit an idea to send it in to us. As Lilia said, we had it open for a few weeks, and it was quite a simple kind of process. Mm-hmm. You didn't have to develop your idea very far, because the idea was that if we latched onto it and loved it, you would be assigned to one of us. You'd get your very own little programming mentor, and that we would together shape the event, help you find the panelists, develop it in the direction that it needed to go in. So that is what we did here. We've got one on sex in animation, which ended up being quite a straightforward talk from someone who is an academic and an expert in that area who sent it in to us.
With a lot of fun clips.
Yeah. And then this was Crip Collective. So that was a submission from a collective talking about representations of disabled women on screen and how there are all these kind of negative tropes associated with that, but also kind of having some fun unpicking it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they're just a couple of examples, but as we say, we ended up with loads.
Yeah, and I think something that worked really well with this is that we had such a broad spectrum of people submitting, and then eventually, programming in the summit. We had people that, had been in the industry for decades. We had students who had maybe just done an MA in film curation. We had people that did not work in film at all, but just had a love for it. So I think that was a real benefit of it, that we were able to kind of create that space for a lot of people. And as we say, there is a real habit of gatekeeping when it comes to programming. And I think shared knowledge, opening doors, just being collaborative is so integral to creating exciting programs, and that's something that we really, really wanted to do with this, and we were very lucky that it worked out really well. I mean, we got over 100 submissions, and actually it made our jobs really, really difficult as well, because
we had to up the budget for freelancers.
We did.
It's a pleasure.
But it was a pleasure to go through those applications, and as a as a trio.
Yeah.
Pick some to go forward.
It also meant that we could throw out some of our less developed ideas. We were like, you know what, it's not that good.
Yes,
Let's do that instead.
So and I think we're really excited to kind of continue that this year, and you can find out a little bit more about.
I will also say we're
it.
opening a similar process, less of an invite, but it will become easier to submit general ideas to the BFI South Bank programme year round. Obviously, this is a moment where we have budget, we have space, and we are looking for people, but I think it can be a bit opaque sometimes for those of you who are looking to get into programming and don't really understand what that process looks like or what we're looking for. So that is changing literally this week. There will be some information on our website of how to tell us your thoughts if you want to.
Excellent. And then we come on to community collaboration. So obviously there are a wealth of amazing organisations, collectives run by women, not just in London, but also across the country. And these are just a select few of those that we've worked with over the past few years. Tape are a mainstay in the summit. Kim,
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to...
I love Tape Collective. Look those guys up. They do programming, they do events, they're now working in distribution. We've had them at the summit every year. They program short film programs for us. They run the collage corner, as we say, is the mainstay. But I know we're short on time, so I won't do a deep dive into Tape Collective other than say look them up. They are the best.
I'll speak to Rianne Pictures and Shasha. So I used to be a senior programmer and festival producer at Rianne Pictures, which is they used to run, they still do run, Women X Short Film Festival. So we used to bring in a program of some of their award-winning shorts every year. So the festival would happen in September, and then we would pick some of the award-winning films to screen at our summit in January. And then Shasha Movies are an online platform showcasing like Middle Eastern cinema by women, and I met Bella, one of the members of the organisation, through a mutual filmmaker friend, and we got chatting, and they brought us an incredible programme of restored Jocelyn Saab shorts this year. So they had worked with the Jocelyn Saab Foundation to bring us these shorts, and I think it was like one of the first times that they were screened in the UK, so that was a really, really special moment. And then we've also got Messy Collective, which Ruby, you worked with.
Yeah, so Messy are they run social events for people who are writing in film and television. So basically very informal, fun networking events. They originally got in touch about running one of those during the LFF, but we couldn't make it happen, so we remembered them and brought them back for the summit and got them to actually do some more focused small group writing exercises. They're great fun and they throw good parties. So if you're a writer, check them out.